right, friends, we're back in action here at Betting You on Odd Shopper because there's that many games to get to. Yes, we talked about the big time matchups, Ohio State and Oregon, some of the SEC clashes, and all that is available on Betting You, the main episode. But now it's time for Betting You Overtime. It's time to get into the MAC, into the random Big 12 schools, into some teams that I didn't even know existed. So that's why we have Mac and Jessica here. I'm just here to steer the ship. And we were both talking before the show. It's kind of an awkward week 7. There's a lot of bizarre matchups, a lot of middling spreads. I don't have as many bets already placed as I normally do, but this episode, I think I have a couple spots that I do like.
It's the same for me, and we talked about this on Tuesday. It's perhaps the best viewing week of the season. Betting, it's a little tricky. We're still dealing with some spots where teams are maybe underrated, facing a very difficult non-conference schedule. But there's just a lot of nuance to these. There's a lot of teams that are injured coming into these games. And we've seen teams that we thought were good coming into the year play down to competition for seemingly no reason. I'll highlight Liberty. They basically returned every single player on their team other than CJ Daniels. And they suck. I mean, they don't actually suck. They're probably going to go undefeated because their strength of schedule is like 151st. Like, I don't know what happened, man.
FIU, not to spend any time on this, but like FIU scores to tie the game and they don't go for 2 to try to win. And then they lost an over. Like when you're an inferior team, you got to go for 2. But just the fact that Liberty's in these games, if they get into the playoff, I mean, we saw this in the bowl game, but like they might be 3 touchdown underdog.
Yeah, they would take a lot of help for them to get in. But, I mean, they got rolled by Oregon in the bowl game. They're going to play a team like that, not Oregon themselves. Maybe they would play Oregon. I don't think Oregon takes down an auto bid, but perhaps they do. What do I know? But if they face like a good Big Ten team, they would get rolled, I think.
Yes.
What was that score, like 49-3 or something crazy?
Bad. It was like I remember I bet the over in that game like a month early because it was a bowl game. And then I still don't know if I even got there. I can't even remember. I had food poisoning that day from watching Wyoming. True story. Anyway, I remember that so vividly. And then Georgia beat Florida State by literally 60. But we're not talking about any of that on the show. What we are talking about are teams like Louisville and Virginia type squads and matchups. And let's start getting into it. So Louisville's a team. Honestly, I don't really know what to think about them. My only real position against them was I thought that SMU could give them some trouble. Louisville's super strong at home, and they were not able to get it done. Now they have to go into Virginia, who's better than I probably thought. 7.5 point spread. You're getting the hook if you want it. You have any interest in this game?
I have some interest in this game. It's light, but I might end up taking a Virginia side. Louisville's been a team I've been trying to short kind of just for 2 years now, going on 2 years, certainly last year and then heading into this year. And it's all schedule driven. I don't know who makes these schedules. Their AD schedules nothing but cupcakes. And then they've been fortunate in their ACC run, which is maybe the weakest of the Power 4 conferences right now. I don't know. There's a strong debate between them and the Big 12. But this team has played just incredibly easy level of competition. And then once you get into these more difficult games, you have a selling opportunity, which you and I both did successfully against SMU. They looked putrid in that game. But there are some weaknesses with this team overall. And I think first and foremost, we need to start on the offensive line. They just lost their left tackle, Monroe Mills, to a serious injury. And that's a unit that was already allowing a 38% pressure rate. They were 88th in pass blocking, 69th in run blocking with their best player on the offensive line. Now he's gone. I don't think we see him for a while. And on defense, if you can stop the pass rush in Gelati, you can beat this team. Their secondary is extremely injured. A lot of guys are in and out of the lineup here, and I'm not sure who they'll have back. So Quincy Riley missed their game. Devin Neal, one of their depth pieces, entered the transfer portal, which is important because Tavion Nicholson and Tamarian McDonald in their secondary both had been dealing with injuries and couldn't play a full game in their last time out. They also got injuries to Tramel Logan on the edge in game, and their defensive tackle Desmond Tell missed their last game. So they have a very weak defense, largely due to injuries, and that doesn't help when guys are portaling out mid-season. I think this is the healthiest we've seen Virginia all season long. They had a laundry list of injuries coming into the season. I don't know what they were doing in camp, but a lot of these guys are back now. I just saw their depth chart last night for this week. Last week they had a weird late scratch situation on offense that you and I talked about where they didn't have two of their top 3 receivers. They're both back on the depth chart, and they weren't expected to miss the game, which was just, a weird situation. So I'm guessing they both play. Their offensive line returned Mikhail Boley. He's one of their best starters, and he typically is their left tackle. He didn't play in the beginning of the year. He's back. They had a bunch of injuries on defense. Most of those players are back with the exception of just one defensive tackle, Jason Hammond, and we'll see if he plays. But you're kind of getting the best version of Virginia all season long. So it's tricky to look at their efficiency metrics. What do we really think this team actually could be? Because I like Colandrea. Fields is solid. And the offensive line has been playing well, even without Mikhail Boley to start the year. Like right now, this team is 55th in pass blocking and 11th in run blocking. They shockingly have a decent run game, which is not something we've ever really been able to say about them. You have to go all the way back to, like the Bryce Perkins years. But yeah, this team is surprising, and I think we may see the best edition of them coming up. It's just hard to project because how much do these guys matter to the spread? Does it take any time for them to gel? I certainly think Louisville's the better team, but I think you might have a potential buying window on Virginia just against the spread with so many players returning.
Yeah, like I said, Virginia's they're getting it done. I don't think they've played the best schedule, but I trust their quarterback. They're at home. You're getting 7.5. I could do it. It's not going to be a Louisville position. I'll tell you that much. No chance. So yeah, Virginia pass to get us started. Cincinnati and UCF. UCF falling on some hard times, honestly, just not getting it done. Now they're back in the bounce house. They are 3.5 point favorite. It's a Cincinnati team that I've taken in spots. They killed me against Pittsburgh, but that's neither here nor there. It's like every team against Pittsburgh. What do you make of this matchup?
It's another tricky one, but I'm curious what you think on UCF right now. If you had to diagnose their struggles, do you have an idea what you think it might be?
So it's interesting. When they played Colorado, my first thought was that, okay, it's maybe a team that's kind of in a situation. I've seen teams like this. If they just get punched first, they're not able to kind of get back. When they get going with that running game, they're super effective. But if they don't, it kind of dilutes the entire offense. But then I watched pieces of the Florida game, and I don't know, man. I was just like very, very concerned with the offense. I mean, they only scored 13 points in that game. Jefferson did nothing. And they ran, it was under 3 yards a carry. So like, I'm just really concerned about what's happening to them on the front, I guess.
You have a lot of the same concerns that I do. First of all, KJ has always been a bit of a volatile signal caller, and that hasn't changed. He already has 7 turnover-worthy plays, and that's concerning because they had a really easy schedule to start the year where their offense was just completely neutered. We know he can run, which is solid, but a sub 60% completion. The O-line's been pretty good, but I think the problem UCF is running into is they just don't have any receiving threats. Mm-hmm. You can kind of treat this team like Arizona, where if you put a little bit of extra coverage on Kobe Hudson, like who beats you? The rest of your defense can just be dedicated to stopping RJ Harvey and KJ Jefferson, and those guys are solid. But like the second you get into a 3rd and long, UCF is almost cooked. I think Cincinnati's defense is probably a little better than what we've seen as well. I thought the strength coming into the year for this team was going to be up front with this was assuming Corleone was going to play and he's returned. So they're 103rd in run defense. I'm a little surprised that it's that low with Corleone back in the fold. I think there's room for improvement there. And then their secondary is 35th in coverage. This was a big question. I didn't know if they would be bad. I kind of thought they might heading into the season because they're basically using all transfers outside of Kalen Carroll and Jordan Young. Like they added 7 transfers in the secondary. Those guys have actually played well, which has been a bit of a surprise. You never know with the transfer portal. But they've actually faced some pretty decent signal callers too. You already mentioned the Pitt game, which killed me. But they did a decent job against Baron Morton. It has not been the easiest schedule for Cincinnati. So I've kind of been impressed. And then on offense, we know what they do. They had that offensive line coming into the season, easily the strength of their team. They got back Wilder at tackle, helping even more a unit that's already 38th in pass blocking, 27th in run blocking. So they can run the ball. Sorsby's been shockingly good too. He only has 2 turnover-worthy plays all season long, doing exactly what they need him to, and it's just not throw the ball to the other team. And then you always have Kiner. He's going to play in this game. I know he got banged up in the last one, but everything looks optimistic on his status for this contest. UCF's defense has definitely shown cracks, and that's concerning. Like, the only player that they really had success against was Hunter Watson. Everyone else has been above 7.5 yards per attempt, and pretty easily too. Josh Hoover, Shedeur Sanders, Graham Mertz, and Lagway. I don't know, man. I'm not sure how much. I think I might need to adjust my priors on UCF and Cincinnati going in opposite directions. Cincinnati up, UCF down. Bounce house is very hard to play at, though. I guess I should note that.
Definitely tough environment. I do trust UCF in the building, but talk about adjusting priors. Yeah, it's just not the team that I thought they would be. And you mentioned it. It has turned into a one-dimensional offense at times. And when you're trailing, it makes it even worse. That's, to me, what the problem has been. It magnifies your biggest deficiencies. So there is a 3 and a hook out there. You'd have to lay some juice. I haven't bet this game. Not sure that I will, but keep an eye on it.
I think their center got hurt.
Who, UCF?
Yes. He only played 22 snaps, and I really tried to figure this out, but the only thing I could find, especially on like Twitter, were people tweeting at the beat reporter, like, what happened to Kittler? Why did Kittler only play 22 snaps? Like, what's going on? And he didn't respond to any of them. I don't know if he was at the game or if he was paying attention, but nice. No, something to monitor.
Okay. I mean, yeah, that certainly doesn't help. Just puts more strain on it. Arizona and BYU, this doesn't help. This is a team. BYU, I really don't even know, man. I run into these situations all the time where I'm just like not on a team at all. And now I'm kind of interested in them, and then they'll turn into a pumpkin because BYU is not a team I was high on. They're defying the odds. I feel like I'm missing something when I break them down, but I'm no fan of Arizona. BYU is always tough in their building. 4.5. I'm leaning BYU here.
I did take this. It's largely injury related. Get to that in a second. First, I kind of just want to speak to what BYU has done well, where they've exceeded expectations, and they've exceeded a lot of them. They have pretty good data points. The SMU win is a little noisy because SMU did move the ball well. For whatever reason, once they got into the red zone, BYU's defense held strong, so SMU basically was held to just kicking field goals. It's a little noisy is what it is. Wyoming is way worse than we thought heading into the year. That was a resounding win for BYU. Kansas State, I think, is a little worse than we thought, but this is still a quality win. The problem is most of their scores came on weird special teams and defensive operations, and then they only beat Baylor by 6. So I still have some questions. How good is this team overall? The places I think they're certainly improved are on defense. They're 31st in total defense, 19th against the run, 58th in pass rush, and 56th in coverage. They don't have a true weakness. And this was a big surprise because really the only place that had a lot of returning production was their secondary. I'm surprised they've stood up well on it. And some of these offenses are pretty good. SMU, Kansas State, those are decent data points for BYU. So can they do the Northern Arizona approach and stop Arizona by using bracket coverage on Ted McMillan? I think the answer is probably. They have a very good secondary. That's where most of their experience is. Arizona just got beat by Texas Tech, who employed a similar strategy, even though Tet kind of did get his in the game, but kind of at the expense of the offense. You know, like, to pick your poison. Do we force the ball to Tet in triple coverage, or do we take what the offense is giving us and hope that the other skill players can actually win and do their jobs? Because the answer has been no. And you also have offensive line concerns with Arizona now. They've lost 3 guys that were projected to start this year. They've still been okay, but they're really struggling to run the ball. They haven't been able to get much going on the ground after Krosky Merritt got suspended. So their offense, I'm not sure, has success against an improved BYU defense, kind of shockingly so. And then on the other side, they lost Traden Stukes and Gunnar Maldonado, 2 starters in their secondary, probably their 2 best for the season. And they already didn't have Chuba Maea on the defensive line, one of their tackles. He's been out. Also, one of the guys I thought that would replace Stukes and Maldonado has been limited in Marquise Groves-Killebrew. I don't know what his status is heading into this game. Arizona was already suspect on defense, especially up front, 96th against the run. BYU's returning LJ Johnson, so that's going to be a problem. I think BYU actually has success in the run game. Their O-line, or LJ Martin, excuse me. LJ Johnson's
who the hell is
SMU
LJ
back.
Johnson?
Different LJ. Different LJ. LJ Martin is back from injury, which should help their running attack, which has been hurt. But their O-line's been great. They returned every starter. 6 guys actually have starting experience. They're 11th in pass blocking, 61st in run blocking. So they should be able to run it down Arizona's 96th ranked defense. And then I think their coverage is probably going to be worse now than the 44th ranking because they lost 2 starters this week. I don't know. I think BYU is completely fine in this spot. Also, you have to go to Provo. I mean, this is a tough spot.
That's what I mean. Tough spot. And yeah, I'm going to find a spot to short BYU. I watched that SMU game. It was ridiculous, but it's still a good team.
That was a weekday, right?
What? Yeah,
it's like a Friday night or something.
It was Friday, and they kicked. Yeah. It was either 5 or 6 field goals. That was also when they were rotating. Like Preston Stone started that game. That's another story for another.
I think he threw an interception on like his second pass in that game.
Yeah, and then Jennings fumbled on the 1 yard. There was a lot of noisy stuff there. But you know what? BYU was not at home for that game, and they are here. It's a real home field advantage, and one that I'm not sure is baked in as much as it should be. Now, California, Cal, and Pittsburgh. Cal's coming off what I would assume is a very emotional game. They had their chances. College game day was there. Now they got the shoes on the other foot. They got to fly all the way to Pittsburgh to take on Pittsburgh, obviously. 3.5 point spread. Credit to the Panthers. Better than I thought. Certainly ahead of the rebuild, if you want to call it that. What do you make of this spot? Pittsburgh, I'm hoping and praying that they continue to go undefeated.
Are you looking for the epic short spot?
Oh, it's coming.
What is your angle? You want them to be under? Oh, you want the SMU spot. That's what you want, right?
That's going to be a tactical nuke if I can get it. Tactical, full clip is going on that game if I can get it. They got to survive this in Syracuse.
I'm debating Cal. They look pretty good against Miami, which I have been going back and forth on this. I don't know if I think this is Miami just being Miami or Cal actually showing improvement, because Cal has played close games against teams that are somewhat decent, but I've honestly been disappointed in their performances in those games. They played Auburn. Yeah, Auburn to 7 points. Auburn had 5 turnovers. You only put up 21 points with short fields and 5 turnovers. Like, that's alarming. What is your offense doing? They're 96th in offense, so I guess it makes some sense. And Auburn's defense is good, but like, what are you doing on the field? And then they played San Diego State, and San Diego State had a backup quarterback in the game, so I can't really read too much into that. They lost to Florida State, and then they played the crazy game against Miami. And I don't know what Miami was doing out there. They had 9 penalties for 110 yards. Like, this Miami team's got to figure out their penalty stuff. Honestly, Miami had no problem moving the ball in that game, aside from their self-inflicted wounds. So I think that could have been worse. The real thing that is kind of hard to evaluate, though, is Cal also had offensive success for like the first time. So can they move this forward to Pitt's defense, who's been better than I thought? They're 41st overall. I still think there's some questions, but certainly undeniable that they're worse than Miami on defense. So I don't know what to make of this. Can they move this forward? I guess we'll see. The O-line is bad. They're 111th in pass blocking, 97th in run blocking. It's gotten Jaden Ott hurt multiple times already this year. They're still down their top 2 receivers who we expected to be their top 2 coming into the year. They haven't played at all. That's Grays and Merriweather, the transfers from Ohio State and Notre Dame. They're hurt on the offensive line. Vaticani's been out since he collapsed on the field in week 3, I believe it was. And their left tackle, Nick Morrow, got hurt in their last game against Miami. So you've got some injuries on the O-line that already kind of complicate a situation that was bad heading into the year. Not that Pitt's super scary on defense. They are pretty good up front. They don't rank outside the top 53 in any category. Their worst is their pass rush. But still, that's an offensive line concern. On the other side, Pitt has been running really, really hot. They only have 3 interceptions, but Eli Holstein has 9 turnover-worthy plays. This is about as hot as you could possibly run as a QB. Their offensive line has been problematic too, but it's a little better than Cal's. They're 73rd in pass blocking and 108th in run blocking. And unlike Cal, they have a cheat code in Desmond Reed, who has just been able to – he is up there with like the most efficient backs in the entire country, excluding Ashton Genty. He's like in a tier of his own. But Holstein has been good outside of the turnover-worthy plays, 5.5 yards per carry, 66% completion, 9.1 yards per attempt. Part of the reason I didn't like Pitt is they have a bunch of FCS transfers. They came with the OC, and that's work, man. I also didn't know that Narduzzi would kind of let this OC do his job. He is. So, I mean, they've somehow figured out this organization, which was dysfunctional last year. They're getting the most out of it. The most yards per attempt they've allowed to a quarterback has been Sorsby at 7.8. That's pretty good. So I'm not sure. On Cal's defense, they're 50th, weaker against the run, 64th. That's troublesome against Desmond Reed. I think this is a close game. I think Pitt has the advantages, but still haven't taken it yet. I was waiting on a -3. I don't know what the current line is. Is it 3.5 still?
It's moved to 3.5 at a bunch. Yeah, it's basically 3.5 everywhere. There's a 3 at -125.
Yeah, that's tricky.
Yeah, so keep an eye on this one again. At perfect time. I mention it every show, of course, because it's very important. If you're looking for answers to these type of questions, it's one of the many reasons to just join and get inside the ropes at Tails. Things like this. You get into my Discord or Matt's Discord. You're able to ask questions. You're able to get access to lines before we do these shows. Super, super valuable stuff. The picks sync right from the app right into Discord. So when you're in here, you go right to them, and it's super simple to get them. You can take them. Very, very good stuff. So if you're looking for that type of stuff, look at all this. I mean, come on now. Really worth the price of admission. The links are below. Come give it a shot for a week. See if it changes kind of how you build out your CFB cards. For me, if you ever wanted to bet something that you didn't know existed, like random Kyrgyzstan soccer, that would be another appeal to it. Maybe that's what you've been waiting for. Better than talking about Minnesota and UCLA, let me tell you. This is a game that shouldn't exist. They should just come together and say, we don't need to play this game. Pretty sure they're going to play it. 4.5-point spread. Minnesota, I sent you a tweet that I believe is real, that PJ Fleck's doing some weird, wild stuff. He's giving people like pseudo truth serum. They're rallying the troops. Minnesota's got that kind of program at times. I'm not the biggest fan of what they do, but I'm really not a fan of UCLA. I don't know if I want to get involved in this game. What do you?
I do want to get involved. I'm hoping UCLA. Maybe some of these spots are what have cost me this year, but I don't know how UCLA is competitive. Okay,
at least you're on Minnesota, because I was going to say, if I bet this, it will be on the Minnesota side.
Can we get some of the truth serum from Fleck for our position on this game or whatever that? I don't even understand really what he did.
Apparently, from what I read, he gave people a little capsule and it was just Sprite. It's like in the original Space Jam when he gives them the magic drink, but it just is water. PJ Fleck is resorting to Space Jam tactics, and that is dangerous.
Well, it kind of worked.
It worked in the movie too. You don't see us controlled by the Monstars. Maybe he knows what he's doing.
This was a team I liked heading into the year. It's just PJ Fleck being PJ Fleck. Like, you lose to North Carolina largely because of your kicker, who was first team all conference in the Big Ten. Then they played Rhode Island, Nevada. You can't take too much away from that. They were in the Iowa game until the second half when Caleb Johnson just dominated them, which is weird to me because then they played the exact same team in Michigan the following week and arguably should have won. They outgained Michigan 4.5 yards per play to 4.0. So maybe PJ Fleck and this staff just made the right adjustments to defend Michigan, because, they don't do anything any different than Iowa does, but you got killed in one, then you played close in the other. But then last week they had another good game plan against USC and just rammed the ball down their throat to a victory. And their defense has been better than expected too. So at first I was like, okay, maybe I need to adjust my Minnesota Priors down from where I thought they were preseason. Now I'm kind of bouncing back. And you face UCLA here, who is an atrocious team. You have to go across the country, which is problematic, but this coaching staff has no idea what they're doing. The only reason they were competitive in the Penn State game, and I say that loosely, Penn State took out all their starters in the second half. Yards per play, they were absolutely dominant over UCLA. They were at 9.9 yards per pass attempt. They just chose to stop doing it. And then rather than use like some bells and whistles into your run game, they just ran the ball straight up the middle to get out of there as quick as possible with no injuries. So they were at 2.8 yards per carry. I don't think that's actually reflective of what this offense is doing when they're competitive and trying in games. So I don't even think that's a feather in UCLA's cap. It was Penn State more than anything else, just trying to get out of there with full health, which makes sense. They have postseason aspirations. But anyway, they've been absolutely clobbered in every single game. I guess the only other time they really had success was against LSU. They lost multiple starters on their defense in that game. LSU, that is. You look to the player personnel, Minnesota's largely healthy. The only concern I have is Maverick Baranowski, one of their linebackers, missed the game. And they did have Kerry Brown, one of their safeties, go down in their last game as well. But then this might be a good thing for them because it forced them to put their 4-star freshman, Coy Parrish, on the field, who's been amazing in the glimpses we've got with him. And he ended up being one of the highest graded defenders on the entire team, according to PFF in his first game action. Like, Parrish should be playing a near full-time role. Put him in the slot. I don't care what you do with him. He's your best recruit, and it shows. From there, I think the offense is fine. It's limited. We just hope Brosmer can take care of the ball. He's run bad on turnovers, 5 turnover-worthy plays, 4 picks. They're almost all being converted right now, which is unsustainable. But the O-line's great. They're 29th in run blocking. The run it with Taylor, that's the foundation of their unit. And UCLA's defense is terrible. Their best metric is their run defense, and it's 99th. Everything is outside the top 100. They have a ton of injuries. They've lost a bunch in the front too. Like Gary Smith's, he got hurt in week 1. He's been on crutches. He's not going to play. Keanu Williams has been out. They had an edge miss their last game. Jacek Busic. Then they have a bunch of depth pieces gone on offense. Garber's missed their last game. Who knows if he's back? 2 of their top 3 receivers have been out. They lost their tackle, Ruben Unigier, in their last game. He might have been benched, honestly. I don't know. It was tough to figure that out. But, this team is depleted. They're dysfunctional. Bieniemy cannot figure out how to effectively use this offense. Their line is 105th in run blocking, 126th in pass blocking. Like, do they have a single thing they do well? I guess they're 64th in their special teams rating, but
nice.
I know that's great. Minnesota's still somehow 5, even though they missed a bunch of kicks, and I guess that makes sense. It appears that kicker is rebounded after whatever it was that happened. You know what it was?
That we bet it?
I bet them. Yeah.
Yeah, so did I. Yeah. Yep, that sums it up pretty nicely.
Anyway, I'm going to take Minnesota. UCLA's taken some money, but I just don't see a single advantage as long as PJ Fleck's hat is on correctly for this game.
Well, that's debatable. We'll revisit that a little later. But, yeah, Minnesota, I totally get it. I get it. All right, moving. This game was affected by the hurricane. They had to juggle some things around, move the time. But Memphis and South Florida are still playing. 7.5-point spread. Tigers, favorite. I was pretty bullish on South Florida. It really hasn't come together to the fullest extent that I thought, but do you think they're a live dog here?
No. So I was trying to avoid this game kind of, especially when the line moved because of the hurricane stuff, and then they moved it, so it seems like it's a non-factor. But that's the reason you've seen kind of, especially the total bouncing all over the place. It's back up to 61, so most of these games are supposed to be unaffected by the hurricane. It's supposed to be mostly passed through by this point. But I am interested in a Memphis -7. To your point on USF, sorry, I always say that. USF, South Florida, I should just say. They returned a lot of guys this offseason. And you and I talk about this a lot. It's almost like you have to balance returning production versus how good these guys are. And generally speaking, you're trying to project forward because they're young kids. Like some of them, the 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, haven't even fully grown into their bodies. Now they're in a weight room for the first time, or like a legitimate weight room. But they haven't made much progression. The offensive line returned every starter. 2 of them have not even been full-time starters, so they went to transfers and other players. RJ Perry got hurt. He's their left tackle. So now you have an offensive line that is experienced, but I just don't think they've shown any improvement. They're still 130th in pass blocking, 129th in run blocking. That's like exactly where they were last year. So to have all your guys back and take 0 steps forward, it's a little unexpected, but now we have that data. They can't block. And first of all, it's gotten Byron Brown hurt. He's still day-to-day. I think he plays through it, but that's not great. You'd be a little bit weary of his mobility, I think, which is his best asset. And unfortunately, he doesn't have any time to throw downfield. I actually kind of like the receivers on this team. Sean Atkins has been good. Abdur Yaman Racine is a Purdue transfer. Michael Brown-Stevens is a Minnesota transfer. Jaden Alexis went to Texas. Joshua Cobb's a Wyoming or Houston transfer, I believe. They even have like Teron Keith in the backfield from Bowling Green. They have a lot of good skill position players. It's just their foundation is broken. They don't have anything up front that can keep Byron Brown protected, and then that stems to your run game. You can't actually get a lot going there either. On defense, I think they're going to be down 3 starters. Rashad Cheney, defensive tackle. Jalen Schuler missed their last game at linebacker. Deshaun Rucker in the slot. That's problematic. Your defense has been better, but it's still a unit that ranks 108th overall. They're better against the run, 66th, 128th in coverage. I mean, that's my main concern when you face Memphis. You got to go against Hennigan. He's been a little worse this year, but his efficiency metrics are still completely fine. The offensive line for Memphis is elite. They're 7th in pass blocking, 19th in run blocking. So they're working with a fantastic foundation. I think their skill position players are very good too. Blankhamsey, Drake, and Taylor, all very good receivers, experienced, all starters from last year. Mario Anderson's a South Carolina transfer, running back. The offensive line's been very good as well. We mentioned their metrics. They were coming into the year with just 2 returning starters. They hit the portal and they hit. They certainly hit. So, I mean, I just don't think there's a single advantage with USF aside from the home field. I have a hard time backing them, and I think Memphis is a team that could just roll them. Outside of the Navy game, Memphis is pretty unblemished.
Yeah, and Navy's as unique of an opponent as you can play. So I don't read anything into that. And they're good.
USF has gotten blasted.
I know.
They beat Southern Miss, which I don't know is something you can really look
that
to.
Doesn't count. We're about to talk about them.
And then their production against Bam was they brought out a bunch of gimmicks in the first half, and when those failed, Bama just blasted them. They got killed by Tulane. That's their most important game, I think, in this evaluation is they just got – and Southern Miss outgained them yards per play. How did Southern Miss mess this up? It was 8.0 yards per play to 6.9 for USF. I actually forgot to mention this, and I just saw it in my notes. I'm like, what the hell is this?
I mean, yeah, that's disqualifying. You should never have that happen.
They did. Southern Miss did have 3 turnovers.
I mean, Southern Miss is off. Let's talk about Southern Miss. We're going to talk about them right now because Southern Miss is mercifully on the slate. They're terrible. And they play, I mean, the reason I'm talking about this game is actually on the other side. Louisiana Monroe is, for them, it's actually been a pretty good year. They've got a couple wins. They're favorite in a game by a touchdown. That hasn't happened in quite some time against, I would assume, non-FCS opponent. They took down James Madison. Now, I just broke down the James Madison game no more than an hour ago. In that game, James Madison had 4 turnover on downs and a fumbled touchdown. So, like, it was a bizarre game on several fronts, but Southern Miss is not James Madison. Do you think that Louisiana Monroe can keep this going?
I think they can win, cover. I want to bet Southern Miss.
I don't even know who Louisiana. This is like truly, I don't even know who their quarterback is.
It's Aiden Armenta.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know who that is.
I don't know if he's any good. We have like a game and a half sample, but I did look into it. But anyway, I guess like I'll just pick up where I left off. Southern Miss outgained USF 8.0 yards per attempt to 6.9, and somehow lost the game 49-24. Somehow, I mean, how do you do this? They played a pretty tough schedule. Kentucky, they didn't even finish the game. They beat an FCS team. There was the UCF contest. They got rolled by Jacksonville State. And then they played well against Louisiana, 23-13. That's a respectable opponent, one that I like. Louisiana Monroe, I don't know what to make of this team. So they beat an FCS team. They beat UAB, who's about to fire their coach. They lost to Texas. So you can't really look at that game. They beat Troy in a game they had a 16% post-game win expectancy. And then they beat James Madison in a game they had a 20% post-game win expectancy. I mean, talk about running hotter than the sun. You mentioned the turnover on downs and everything. It's just a disaster for James Madison right from the start. They did hold James Madison to 4.9 yards per play, which I guess is a feather in the cap for their defense because James Madison had been on a tear prior to that. But can we even use it going forward? Southern Miss, I think, has played better than their box scores indicate, not by a lot, but Rodemaker, he's one of these quarterbacks like Peyton Thorne that has more interceptions than turnover-worthy plays. 4 interceptions, 3 turnover-worthy plays. I mean, you just have to expect regression at some point. Like, receivers don't just volleyball set their football to defenders that often. So I'm expecting regression there. Their offensive line's a little better than I was expecting. They're 64th in pass blocking. They flat out can't run. They're 125th there, and their running backs stink. So you are reliant on this pass game. But I do think it's better than what we've seen so far this year. And then you look at the Louisiana Monroe defense. They did stand up to James Madison just fine. They have a lot of concerning data points other than that, particularly on the run. They've allowed at least 4.5 yards per carry to every single back they've faced, at least one on every team. So that's noteworthy. They have been pretty good in coverage, which should be a concern here because Southern Miss can't run the ball. So, like, stylistically, it does match up well for Louisiana Monroe. But is it enough? I'm not sure it's enough to lay with Louisiana Monroe because their offense is also inept. Yeah. Their offensive line is worse than Southern Miss. They're 111th in pass blocking, 121st in run blocking. New QB, I don't know what to make of him, but he's only played a game and a half, and he already has 4 turnover-worthy plays. Somehow that hasn't cost them, which is a miracle. They won both their games. And then their skill position players are pretty bad outside of the run game. They do have that. Southern Miss's defense is 103rd. They have some bad data points. That just flat out needs to be said. Like, Brock Vandegrift got them. Tyler Huff got them. There are some decent ones, too. Like, Byron Brown was at 6.7 yards per pass attempt. That just might be USF's fatal flaw, unable to protect. Ben Wooldridge was only at 7.4, so that's decent, too. Ultimately, to put a bow on this, I think you have 2 below-average teams at almost every position without really a strength anywhere. Like, Southern Miss best asset on their team is their pass blocking unit. And then Louisiana Monroe's best asset is their coverage unit, which is 59th. Just pretty greasy. I mean, if you're going to give me 7 in a volatile game, like, overall power ratings, I have Louisiana Monroe 120, Southern Miss 121. Like, I'll just take a 7 when you're going to give me that.
It's hard to argue with that. I'm not sure that Louisiana Monroe's elite home field advantage can overcome. These are bad teams. And I honestly, I'm not surprised that Louisiana Monroe's favored. I am surprised that it's touched 7. That does surprise me, to be completely honest. So keep an eye on it. That's
greasy.
That's greasy. This is pretty greasy too. UTSA, who I forgot existed, against Rice. I honestly haven't seen Rice at all. They played Army at one point, I believe.
They got killed.
Yeah, they got smoked.
I bet them in that game. What a mess.
I saw UTSA play Texas State, and they were thoroughly drummed. Then did they play Texas? They played Texas, right?
Yeah, they got killed.
Yeah, they got killed. Too. So I've only seen them in absolute just blowout games. They are favored here. 5.5. Obviously, there are 2 Texas schools, no major travel issues. Who has the advantage here?
I think it's Rice, as long as you can get their quarterback situation figured out. I'm not confident that that's the case, but they have a lot of pretty good underlying metrics everywhere else. UTSA is a mess.
Yes, they are.
They've been rotating quarterbacks. They did have DeCorian Clark kind of return in their last game, and I believe they're off a bye now, so perhaps he's better, which is important because their receivers are horrible. They're 115th in overall efficiency. Offensive line is still putrid, 101st in pass blocking, 94th in run blocking. That was a huge problem for them last year. Whatever quarterback they tried out there has been bad, whether it's McCown, Marburger. They haven't even really given the FCS kid a look. So the offense is completely dysfunctional. Rice is 36th in total defense. They've stood up to some pretty decent signal callers, and it's funny now, you mentioned this, really every time an Armed Force Academy comes in as an opponent, Memphis, they've largely taken care of business outside of Navy. Rice largely took care of business on defense outside of the Army game, which is wild that we're in such a place with Army and Navy. I can't wait for them to continue playing this year and then get to some better opponents. They both played Notre Dame, which is going to be sick. But anyway, this is not an Army segment, but Rice's only real crack has been against Army. That's looking better and better throughout the year. Their problem has been on offense. And their problem has been E.J. Warner has 6 turnover-worthy plays, and all 6 of them have been converted to interceptions. I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think Rice necessarily has the best offensive attack, but it should be better than what we've seen so far this year. And this makes sense. Their overall receiving grade isolating their receivers is 119. Some of these interceptions are certainly on the receivers and not all on E.J. Warner. Their offensive line is third in pass blocking. It's a pretty good unit. Dean Connors is a good back for this team. And then UTSA, they're 66th in defense, but they're 121st in coverage. Rice runs an air raid, so that's a problem for them in this spot. Not to mention, they largely win with their pass rush at 21st. Rice being third in pass blocking neutralizes that. I do have some concerns. Rice has a lot of guys I have flagged for injury. They just don't have a good reporter, so I don't know if this was they're rotating more or what it was. But anyway, to get into that, Marcus Williams, the backup safety, haven't seen him recently. Play Wyatt hasn't played since week 1. He's a starting safety. Tyson Flowers at safety, Jonathan Jean at safety, DJ Arkansas at linebacker, and Blake Bonish at defensive tackle. All those guys missed some sort of time, whether it was the full game or played limited snaps in their last contest. Then on the offensive line, they were down 2 starters, John Long and Ethan Oniwanwa at tackle. Obviously, that's a concern with UCF's pass rush. They also didn't have tight end Brown Groden in their last game. Now, they are off a bye, so they have 2 weeks to come into this and get healthier, but that's a lot of questions. So right now I have this flagged to play on Saturday morning if we get some positive Rice injury news. Otherwise, I'm just going to watch this game live, probably turn it on the TV, see who trots out with the starting offensive line, and take it live immediately if we get some pretty good news on these guys. That's going to be the key, but finger on the trigger with Rice, willing to play with news.
There we go. Again, we'll see in Discord. You'll get those alerts. Easy stuff. Also, if you're watching this video, you made it this far, hit the like button for us. Really helps us out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. You don't want to miss out on any of the college football content or any of the content we have in general. Marshall and Georgia Southern, my God. More teams that are just, I don't know. This is a more competitive spread. We're almost at a pick 'em here. Marshall's a slight favorite. Both these teams have a lot of weird data points. I saw Marshall play Virginia Tech. Georgia Southern, I haven't really seen much of. What do you make of these teams?
I'm interested in Marshall, just trying to get more acclimated to the Sun Belt here. One of my favorite conferences, especially as they start to play weekday games. This is going to be electric for this conference in the coming weeks. But anyway, yeah, then we won't have to watch as much conference.
Why are they in the Sun Belt?
Marshall?
Yeah, I just don't picture them. Weren't they in Conference USA? Or the They were not in the Sun Belt at one point.
That is true. When they moved, I cannot tell you. I don't remember.
There's Byron Leftwich. Yeah.
But they are in the Sun Belt, yes. They have to play.
No, they're in the Sun Belt. I just never think of them as a Sun Belt team.
Yeah, they have to play a conference game here. I don't think of them as a Sun Belt team either anyway. Just overall power rankings have them slightly ahead of Georgia Southern. This is a team that's been fairly injured to start the year, but they changed QBs. They benched Stone Earl and they brought up Braylon Braxton. Small sample size here, but he looked very good in their first real game action with him. 9.4 yards per attempt, 55% completion. That's not great, but it's honestly the exact same as Stone Earl. And he looks way more mobile. And Stone Earl has decent mobility. Braxton's at 8 yards per carry already. He has 1 turnover-worthy play. Stone Earl had 2, so there's not much difference there. But it seems that he's kind of unlocked the offense just a little bit more, perhaps given them a larger ceiling. Maybe this changes as defenses get more film on him. But anyway, it's been a boost for the offense in the short term. And their offense has been pretty good. It's really just been kind of limited by their signal caller. They're 112th in passing, but 50th in running. They've got a great rushing attack, a good offensive line, at least an above average one, 45th in pass blocking, 88th in run blocking. I like their skill position players too. They did lose Elijah Metcalf. He's not going to play in this game, but this is a team that was throwing around money in the transfer portal this offseason. They have a ton of transfers. Like Braylon Brown is on this team now. Tyson Chapman is a former 4-star. They still have 2 former starters in DeMarcus Harris and Chuck Montgomery. There's a lot of players in this team have played significant football. And their offensive line being pretty good is, I guess, expected, despite having 1 returning starter. They just added some high-level transfers that have come down, so I'm not too surprised there. Otherwise, Georgia Southern, this is a very tricky team to evaluate. Their competition's been up and down. They played a close game against Boise. The yards per play, honestly, was pretty far in favor of Boise, though, so I think that's a little noisy. Then they go and they beat Nevada, who's a team that shouldn't be messing around with. Georgia State, that game, they were actually outgained 5.7 yards per play to 6.4, and they ended up with a 38-21 victory, which is extremely noisy. Georgia State, man, they missed a field goal. They had a turnover and down that led to points. They threw an interception at their own 36, and then they threw a pick to end the game. I was on Georgia Southern in that contest too, but Georgia State was the better team and should have deserved to win. For Georgia Southern, they run that air raid. It's been okay. J.C. French is kind of just, taken over right where last year's team left off. He has 10 turnover-worthy plays. This is ridiculous. He has 10 turnover-worthy plays that have been converted into one interception.
Yeah, that's
what
impossible.
would Peyton Thorne do for those numbers?
Oh, my God. Imagine if Peyton Thorne had 10 turnover-worthy plays. He would literally have 25 interceptions.
Yes, they've had 10 turnover-worthy plays converted into one pick. I don't know how you could possibly run hotter in this situation. Their line is good. That needs to be said. Their skill position players are pretty good as well, like Dalen Cobb. They returned a lot there. So the air raid probably has some success. But Marshall has this weird defense. It's like I don't know how they have somehow configured their defense this way. They're 120th in run defense, but they're 7th in coverage. So immediately that's kind of a flag for me. Our team's just choosing to run you, not exploit your defensive secondary, which seems to be a little better. I don't have the answer to that. But they have, aside from Will Howard, they've done a good job against decent quarterbacks. Kyron Jones for Virginia Tech, 6.2 yards per attempt. Hayden Wolf, 4.5. He's a MAC QB, but still that's way below average. Joey Aguilar's decent, 6.7 for App State. Now, you can run on them, but again, a lot of that is like Judkins was at 12.4 yards per carry and Trevion Henderson was at 12.7. They were just severely outmatched. I think this defense might be better than we're actually thinking. So I'm interested in playing Marshall minus the 1.5. Haven't taken it yet. Shouldn't be too many injuries to monitor. Wanted to get your thoughts on the weird Sun Belt clash.
Yeah, I tend to feel the same way. Again, it's teams that I'm not super well versed in. Stylistically, though, I kind of agree. And yeah, there's just some weird data. There are certain teams, and listen, that's what you get when you have 4 or 5 games. Like, you're gonna have some weird outliers. Certainly, Georgia Southern in the Boise game, that was week 1. Just weird. I don't really know what to make of it, but you can't draw too many conclusions. And then a team like Marshall, you're drawing conclusions against level of competition that is so wide in terms of range. It's kind of bizarre, but we'll see. I'm going to call an audible here. I want to do this like this if you're game. We have a couple of MAC games on the schedule. I'm going to just put it rapid fire style if you're game. Talk to me just about the MAC. So we've got like teams like Miami of Ohio. I wanted to ask you about the Kent State game. I believe Northern Illinois is another game. Do you have any plays for the MAC? The MAC is so cool they get their own section.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun games in the MAC. Another one we need to keep our eyes on because they're moving to weekdays shortly. Kent State might actually be in a buy low spot against Ball State.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about their defense. Kent State's been a mess the whole season. They lost to FCS St. Francis by 6 points. But Ball State's defense is horrifying. I don't know if I can really truly put into words how bad this defense is. They're 134th in the country. Kent State's 120th. So there's a pretty decent gap there in favor of Kent State. Kent State has the edge in every single efficiency metric on defense, which is wild concerning they're outside the top 100 in run defense. Their pass rush is actually 71st, and 116th in coverage. Ball State is worse than them in every one of those categories. On offense, do we really think Ball State is that much better than Kent State? Tommy Ulikowski shockingly had a good game in his debut. He's currently at 10.1 yards per attempt, now at 46% completion. So really, he just hit McCray on some bombs. But this O-line is pretty damn bad. That's my biggest concern. They're not working with a good foundation. They have like one good skill position player. And then you're kind of just banking on Ulikowski delivering it to McCray, which I don't know how viable that is. But again, Ball State is the worst defense in the country, so maybe it just doesn't matter, and he can do it either way.
What about
I'm kind of surprised. What is the over right now? 59.5?
It's come down a little bit, I believe. Let me see if I can pull it up. Not this game. Ball State, I don't think you already said this, but I just need to repeat. It's at 58.5. Ball State's defense is significantly worse than the worst defenses in the country.
Yeah, it is. It's very bad.
And Kent State scored. Kent State had been horrible. They scored against Eastern Michigan pretty easily.
They should have won. They were at 6.8 yards per play to Eastern Michigan 5.9. That's a different team I'm going to sell. Kent State should already have a win.
This is going over, I'm telling you.
I don't hate that. The pace is not the worst. Kent State's 117th. Ball State's average, 74th. Need to look into that a little bit. Ball State did score on Western Michigan last week. They were at 6 yards per play. Now, I don't know how feasible that is moving forward, but maybe.
They're going to give up 30-plus points again.
Ball State is a good offensive line. Kent State has 2 injuries in their offensive line. I don't think it matters against Ball State's defense. You might be right. I mean, these are, despite trying to play slow, these have been 2 shootout teams. Kent State has allowed 50 points in every game outside of the FCS game. And if Ulitkowski is better than we think, maybe.
And look at Ball State. How many points has Ball State allowed?
37 in every game.
Yeah. What? Ball State, they have no. I'm telling you, somebody in this game scoring 40 points on their own.
I wouldn't be surprised. I need to look into that. I was trying to find a side if Kent State is the lean, but I need to do some work on the total. You bring up good points that I somehow overlooked.
I mean, this is bad. I want to ask you, though, about a couple of other MAC games. Bowling Green would be one of them. 3.5-point favorite over Northern Illinois, who obviously has the marquee win, maybe of the year in terms of the upset. They went into South Bend and got it done. Is that a blip on the radar, or is Northern Illinois the class of the MAC?
Somehow, I always find a way to record the show when stuff is going on outside. The guy's cutting the lawn, right?
Oh, I have a feeling he'll be asking about best bets in a little bit.
I don't know how this has been so reliable during the show. It's like quiet every other time.
I don't hear a thing, so.
I know. I muted myself. He went around the building. He'll come back. Anyway.
Okay.
I kind of like Northern Illinois in this spot. This is a dicey game. Both these teams have great data points over quality teams. Obviously, Northern Illinois has the upset win over Notre Dame. And then they took 2 losses, bad losses, Buffalo in overtime, and NC State, who's way down. They had an 89% post-game win expectancy against Buffalo and 81% against NC State. Honestly, the most concerning data point for me is what they just allowed to UMass.
Yeah, that's right. They were in that game.
What's that?
UMass was in the game.
UMass has been in a lot of games, and they should be better. There's no excuse. Fomashan was at 8.8 yards per attempt. I mean, very good showing for him. But it's kind of been the same thing for Bowling Green. I think this is a pure shootout team. They lost to Penn State. That's a feather in their cap. They lost to A&M. They had a 53% post-game win expectancy there. And then they lost to Old Dominion with a 64% post-game win expectancy. But like Northern Illinois playing with their food, Bowling Green only beat Akron by 7 points. And that was a close game. Akron outgained them yards per play. So I don't know what it is with this conference, just being able to compete with some of the best teams and then struggling against what should be inferior teams. I think, honestly, these SEC teams in Notre Dame are kind of just overlooking them. But anyway, in this spot, I think you have a lot of advantages Northern Illinois' direction. This O-line is incredible. 41st in pass blocking, 12th in run blocking. Bowling Green's defense is atrocious. 80th in run defense, 80th in pass rush, 95th in coverage. I don't think all of that is the good teams either after what we just saw Akron do to them. Jordan Simmons was at 8.1 yards per carry. And you go back to the Bowling Green game, they allowed 6.2 yards per carry to Aaron Young and 7.2 to backup QB Colton Joseph. I think there's some problems here against Ontario Brown. And that's the other thing. Northern Illinois has been hurt. Brown has been out. And Trayvon Rudolph, their best receiver, missed their last game. He's back now, too. But Bowling Green has a cheat code on offense in Harold Fannin. He's done so much for this team. He should get drafted. Basilick has a 68% completion percentage, largely because of him. Their O-line is a little worse than Northern Illinois, 65th in pass blocking, 116th in run blocking. It's kind of just been throw it up to Fannin and pray a lot as their offensive success plan. Run game is okay. I've actually been pleasantly surprised by what they've gotten out of it. But Northern Illinois is 37th on defense, and they've done a better job against quarterbacks. The only blip on their radar has been Fomashan for UMass. I know it's another road team. It's the MAC. This is like some of the least travel you'll ever do in a conference, especially nowadays. I'm interested at Northern Illinois if you give me a field goal.
There's a 3.5 out there that you can get.
I was waiting on that number. It hadn't popped yet, but now I will have a very difficult choice to make.
You are paying extra juice, but it is out there. So keep that in mind. All right. So originally, true story, I was going to mention that PJ Fleck sent you one of the truth serum capsules, and you were going to take it, and it was going to reveal your best bets. But now that the lawnmower guy is here,
could you hear him?
No, I can't hear him at all.
Wow, he came back around and it was very loud.
No, it's amazing. For people that are watching, you'll be amazed at how good whatever like the mics or whatever do to block out noise. Like there is so much shit going on all the time around me, and you can never hear it.
That's wild. I can't believe you couldn't hear that.
I really couldn't. Maybe I'm just deaf. But the Lawnmower Man, I believe that was a bad horror movie at one point. But the Lawnmower Man is going to come around. He's going to ask some questions, and he's going to ask what the hell was going on in there. You're going to mention. You're talking about the MAC and possibly Memphis and possibly Pitt. He's going to say, well, what do you got for me? I'm expanding my lawnmower service. More places. I need more mowers, more whatever those things, leaf blowers. What are you telling this guy? What are the best bets?
So my favorite bet right now is BYU over Arizona with the depleted secondary. There's a lot that I'm waiting on numbers, and if they remain, I will still likely fire on. So why don't you give your best bet, and then I'll return for kind of like the second tier, because I'll tell you the ones I'm going to fire on if they move immediately next. But
so BYU is certainly on my list. I don't care. I'm betting the over in Ball State games until it doesn't work. I did this last week. They had 35 points in the first quarter. I simply do not care what the number is. It's that type of situation. And I'm going to give you one more. I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning of the show. I'm going to take the 7.5 with Virginia. That's a spot that I actually like more and more. I think that they're just a competitive team week in and week out at home against Louisville. So there's going to be more on the card for sure. But those three, BYU, the over in Ball State, and Virginia are on the top of my egregious list.
I agree with you. I'm going to bet Minnesota. There's just no reason to right now because all the money's coming on UCLA. So I might take this all the way to kickoff. But I am going to take that. And then I'm going to take Rice at some point if we get injury news, or I'm going to watch this game, make it a priority to put it at least on one of the screens. If the injuries shake out the way I want them to, and that's just getting some of their starters back, I will bet them against UTSA.
There you go. Again, make sure you are doing your due diligence to get the best numbers, get the latest info. That is why you want to be in the Tails Discord with guys like Matt, guys like myself, and all sorts of really sharp community members. Take advantage of it. Take advantage of Bet365. Those links are below too. All of that stuff can add up to a successful college football week, and that's what we're here to do. So on that note, friends, thanks for tuning in for betting you. Hit the like button on your way out. If you have any questions for Matt, Matt_Gajeski at JazzRazBets on Twitter. Find us, follow us. We'll talk to you guys soon for week 7 in the books. Let's make it a profitable one, and we'll do it all again next week.